This regular meeting of the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee will come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Dr. Kraft-Reese?
Here.
Misty Tomaso?
Here.
Mr. Farley?
Here.
Mr. Gazzillo?
Here.
Mr. Hagmeyer? Mr. Hopper?
Here.
Mr. Locatell?
Here.
Mrs. Latazori?
Here.
Mr. Less? Mr. Peters?
Here.
Mrs. Tucker?
Here.
Mr. Wagner?
Here.
Mr. Armcroft will not be here. We have an open seat in Covington. We have an open seat in Washington. Mr. Bartelli?
Here.
Our CBA rep, Mrs. Miller. And our student rep did email me she cannot be here tonight. We have a quorum.
Very good. At this time, all who are able, please stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, we will entertain any responses from the audience. Does anybody want to speak to the school committee? All right, thank you. No student affairs at this point. We'll entertain approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of September 13th.
Motion to accept the minutes.
Second.
All right, are there any corrections or questions about those minutes?
Well, there is. There's, at the end, it said Mr. Gazzillo asked for an update on the things at Greenville, and it was me. Asked for the update on the
I think that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was me.
Okay, anything else? Any other changes?
Here was the E that you
All right, all those in favor of the corrected minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no, and those minutes are approved. Next is the financial report. Will somebody read the warrants?
Warrant number PR 2019-6 dated September 20th, 2018 in the amount of $617,185.93.
Second.
Very good. Any comments or questions about the warrant? In that case, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Are there any abstentions?
Staying.
Motion is approved, the warrant's approved. The next warrant,
Move warrant number PR 2019-6D dated September 20th, 2018 in the amount of $235,309.69.
Second.
motion's made to approve warrant PR 2019-6D. Any questions or comments? In that case, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Are there any abstentions?
Staying.
That motion is approved. Next warrant,
Move warrant number AP 2019-6 dated September 28th, 2018 in the amount of $1,075,221.17.
Second.
motion to approve warrant AP 2019-6. Are there any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Are there any abstentions?
Staying.
That warrant is approved. I believe that's the end of the warrants. The next motion concerns a donation. Would a member please make that motion?
Be it resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee accept the donation of $25,000 to the Berkshire Taconic Fund from the Early Childhood Development Fund of Berkshire Taconic Community Foundation as recommended by the district treasurer.
Second.
Motion's made to accept the donation of $25,000 to the Berkshire Taconic Fund. Any questions or comments?
This is awful lot. I've never seen an amount this much. Is it, do we have an explanation of what it's about?
Sure.
This actually is a grant that we have been receiving for the last 3 to 4 years. And it's the Parent-Child Home Program, and it's run through the Child Care of the Berkshire. So it's for children younger than pre-K and K ages. And they've been generous for the last 3 or 4 years with this amount.
So it's a donation or a grant?
It's a grant.
Anything else? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Are there exceptions? Abstentions? All right. Motion's approved.
Okay, be it resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee accept the donation of $500 to Wacona Regional High School Activity General Fund from Camp Taconic as recommended by the district treasurer.
Second.
Okay, motion to accept the donation of $500 to the Activity General Fund. Any questions or comments?
Is this for parking? For allowing them to use our parking lot?
I can, would you like me to? Yeah,
Sure.
Okay. Yes, they pay to use the parking lot, and I believe that fee is $150. And then they also donate to where they want to donate each year. They've been doing that for the last couple of years, where they give in excess of what we've asked for.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. That motion is accepted. Next is donation to the Unified Track Program.
Be it resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee accept the donation of $500 to the Wacona Athletic Unified Track Program from WBEC Coach of the Year, Liz Kay, as recommended by the district treasurer.
Second.
The motion is made and seconded. Are there any questions or comments? Okay, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. That motion accepted. Next is communication, and I think there's nothing to be said about the town of Washington and town of Cummington vacancy. Everybody knows that is the case. The next motion concerns the retreat that had been planned. Would a member please make that motion?
Be it resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee approves the postponement of the school committee retreat until the spring of 2019.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to change our schedule that was previously approved. Are there any comments or questions? Wasn't this discussed at the last meeting? The feeling was that we really didn't have a topic to address during the retreat, and the retreat would make more sense after the committee is reorganized, probably in the spring. So the meeting in November would be canceled. Any questions or comments? In that case, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. That motion is accepted. The next item concerns the next election, which will be held in November. And the members listed are those that are up for re-election, or I guess they're all people to be re-elected. We do have open seats, so if anybody knows somebody who would be good and interested, talk to us and we can write him or her in. Next is subcommittee reports. The first is curriculum.
Okay, well, we met on September 20th, and I think that the meeting was quite filled with good things. We tried to redefine our role a little bit, so we examined the Central Berkshire role of committees as well as the MASC website, and we all agreed that we've moved from the field trip approval committee to learning more about district initiatives, test results, textbooks, and extracurricular activities. And to that end, we set up a monthly calendar. So I'm going to give those dates to Greg, and he can put them on our calendar. but once a month we're meeting on a specific topic, and we'll bring it back to the full committee after we learn about that topic. So some of the things will be a school improvement plan, the math program, PBIS, budgets, and then, of course, there's this famous book that Lori gave me to read, and I jumped at the chance to read a new book, because the one I'm reading, Fear by, I'm screaming at the book, so I thought I might read something else. And this is about building relationships and yielding results. And it talks to the fact that school committees and superintendents and the relationship that they have has a direct impact on student performance. And it's kind of interesting, and I thought what we might do is bring you like 3 fun facts we learned from each of the chapters once a month, just so we can present something to you. Does that sound like a good thing to do? Okay. And Lori was going to purchase some more of these books for the rest of the committee that was interested. Not everybody has to read it. And that's all we have to report. Our next meeting will be October 18th. We're jumping on the retreat date that most of us saved. It'll be at 6 o'clock at Central Office, and we'll be discussing the school improvement plan.
Very good. Are there any questions? All right, the next is finance. Mr. Gazillo.
Bonnie's going to give the report tonight. I'll read the motion.
Mrs. P. Tomaso.
Yes, okay. So, thank you very much. So, the Finance Subcommittee met this evening, and there were a few items that we discussed. So, the first thing we talked about was the fiscal year 2018 invoice to be paid with fiscal year 2019 funds. That's listed here as an item. Melissa explained that the amount of this invoice is $258.76. It was basically a human error made in terms of this invoice being presented in the proper fiscal year. There have been steps implemented by Melissa's team to make sure that invoices are tracked electronically, so this is avoided in the future. And there will be tracking of POs to make sure that there are no purchase orders outstanding at the end of the fiscal year, and there'll be follow-up. So hopefully this will not occur next year, but we recognize that there are human errors. So the subcommittee voted unanimously to move this forward for consideration of the full committee.
Do you want me to read the?
Or do you want me to read that?
I can read it.
Okay.
Be it resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee authorized the payment of an FY18 invoice from W.B. Mason for the amount of $258.76 with FY19 funds as recommended by the Finance Subcommittee.
Second.
Motion's made and second to authorize the payment of an FY18 invoice. Are there any questions or comments? In that case, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Is anybody opposed? If you are, say no. That motion is approved.
Okay, then the next topic that we talked about was the superintendent's budget calendar. And on the budget calendar that is in your packet, you will notice that the date for February and March references 2018 should be 2019. So we voted to recommend this to the full committee with the correction to those dates. Okay, and then the next item that we talked about was the Cummington status. This came about because our district attorney was contacted by DESI regarding a regional agreement that is due to be changed, and what the status was on that. So we talked about that a little bit, and we recommended that we suspend the regional agreement revision until after the school building vote, so as not to confuse the towns and interfere with the school building vote. And then we also talked about the fiscal 2020 budget guidelines, and we had a discussion about that. There was a recommendation to recommend the revised guidelines to the school committee, and one of the recommendations of revision under item 12 that's in your packet, there's the budget guidelines are in your packet. One of the recommendations was under 12B to remove the word enrollment from that sentence.
Foundation.
Foundation, I'm sorry, foundation. From that sentence. And we also had a suggestion by a school committee member to add a budget guideline that directs the administration to add budget for a school resource officer to the next fiscal year budget. And we had a motion to include, I'm sorry, to present preliminary budget with the position of an SRO for the district. And then our next meeting will be October 25th at 6 p.m. at Nessicus. Do you want to say anything?
Okay, I would just add that this is only a budget guideline. It speaks to the finances for the budget. It doesn't make anything happen by itself. There will be discussion about an SRO and really a separate vote or consideration done apart from the budget. And tonight, the guidelines, instructions, and the calendar is in the packet, and it's offered for discussion at the table. If there's something that somebody else wants to be considered in the initial budget that comes before us toward the end of this year, or really the beginning of next year. This is the opportunity for the full committee to see where we are right now and to add something. And the guidelines and the calendar will be voted and approved at the next meeting in 2 or 3 weeks. Are there any comments about the guidelines or any need to see something changed or questions about it?
Would the resource officer be one school or two?
That's part of what I'll that's part of what has to be looked at. There are a lot of things that have changed recently. The law has changed, and there's a lot of coordination that has to happen with the police departments. They're actually employees of police departments. There's a lot of coordination that has to be maintained before decisions are made, such as that.
Have we ever had an SRO in this district?
We did, probably 10 or 12, my guess is 10 or 12 years ago. At that time, it was covered by a grant. And I think there was one in both Neskis and in Waukegan. And that probably lasted a couple of years.
Well, quite a few years.
Was it?
So we started in Waukegan, went to Nessicus, and then with budgetary problems, it got whittled down here and there. But it was very successful, very successful.
You know, the committee felt we couldn't afford to do it on our own, and Dalton certainly couldn't do it on its own. So it hasn't been done for probably, was it 10 years ago? Do you say?
At least 10.
Okay.
I can just add to that, Dick, that the superintendent, did express the need to really explore that option and to find out from the committee and from the individual looking at the guideline what exactly we were trying to achieve. And as Dick already mentioned, there's some very new law around how that resource officer can interact with the schools. So we'll be giving the administration some time to explore that and vet it and present it to the full committee, because we felt it was something that should be discussed in full committee and not just in finance sub. But certainly we felt like it was valid to add that to the guidelines at the request of one of the school committee members. So.
When we had a school resource officer, I was vice principal at the high school at the time, and we had a really good relationship. And the resource officer had a very good relationship with the kids. It was really a workable situation, and it's too bad that we had to give it up because of finances, but it really was a very good idea, and it worked very well for us.
All right, the next subcommittee is policy. Is there a member that can report on policies? Okay,
And the next meeting is October 1st.
It's looking that way. I don't know if it's
I
set
don't know
in stone
where,
yet.
but
I can't vote, I can respond to it, but I think that that's not gonna happen. I did post for it on the first.
Was that?
I did post for it on the first.
oh, where is it going to be?
Central office.
Okay, thank you.
okay, there's something that the school committee needs to know about this self-evaluation. Do we know anything that the full committee can be told on that?
I think that's on the agenda for the first. The evaluation tool.
Right.
So I don't think there's anything for it right now.
Okay, all right. Next is personnel, and the first part of that I'll ask Mrs. DiTomaso to describe.
Okay, so the Personnel Subcommittee met on September 20th. Mr. Locatelli, Barbara Kraft-Reese, and myself. And the purpose of the meeting was to begin discussions and evaluating the superintendent evaluation form that's used by the district, which is, we all agreed, was a little bit cumbersome and would like to see it revised. Prior to the meeting, Mr. Locatelli sought clarification from Dorothy Presser at MASC, and she confirmed that we do not need DESI approval to change the form, simplify the rubric, as long as the result fits into the DESI reporting format and standards are met. And of course, the superintendent, by contract, would have to agree to any changes. So our discussion began with reviewing the DESI standard format with the existing district format that we currently use and the format used by the Newton Public Schools. We looked at evaluating the measures in each of the 4 performance standards, and we thought to try to make the form more user-friendly and to have better organization and more meaningful results. For example, we discussed the possibility of moving the final assessment that's on the front page to the back of the report so it flows more correctly, adding revised descriptions in each standard, and possibly adding a numeric indicator to make it a little bit easier to come to a final score in each section, and then the overall score, and also expanding the comment section. During this meeting, we were able to review 3 of the 4 standards, and the evaluation process is very much in the beginning stages. Any changes to the form would be applicable to the position and not to the individual. And the final revised form would eventually be presented to the full school committee for approval. So our next meeting is on October 2nd to continue working on the revisions to the superintendent evaluation form, and that meeting will be held at the central office.
Thank you. Any questions? We do have to go into executive session, but it's more convenient to do that at the end of the meeting, if that's okay with the rest of the committee. We're not going to entertain the assistant superintendent's contract right now. So the next item is the superintendent's goals.
So the only thing I do want to bring your attention to is I did get some feedback and some helpful feedback from one of the members. So I did amend goal number 2 slightly. The other goals are consistent with the goals that you saw last time and that you are already familiar with. The changes really are somewhat technical in making sure that key actions are actually actions, benchmarks are benchmarks. I had, as somebody who wrote IEPs for a long time for a living, had not been as clear. One of my actions was more of a goal, and another action belonged more as a benchmark. So I cleaned that up. I did change the language in the overall goal statement to align more to our current accountability system. You will hear tonight me talk a lot about targets, and that's new language that is really a priority in the new assessment system. So I changed it to be, it's not just about achievement. One of the most important indicators right now is the improvement towards your own targets. So I aligned that in my goal, but everything else, substance-wise, is consistent. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to speak to them, just to kind of refresh your memory before you vote, so you are aware of what we talked about last time. Goal number 1 is really on inclusive practices. Last time the goal was more specific around UDL. We know that inclusive practices are an umbrella that include 3 components, UDL, PBIS, and SEL. Our goal is to really make progress in all 3 areas. Goal number 1 is highly aligned to the strategic plan as well. Talks about how we're going to make progress in all of those 3 areas, the actions I'm going to take, and how we'll measure that progress on what we call our implementation plans. That's really where we are with PBIS for the most part. UDL, we're in an exploring phase with SEL, but we will be creating an implementation plan. Goal number 2 is really the student achievement goal. Again, we're trying to increase overall student achievement. And what I did add in the amendment that you have in front of you, and targets. So it's not just about your achievement in comparison to other schools, it's how you're performing against your own targets, and you'll see that tonight. That includes some of the steps that we will be taking to do that, looking closely at the coaching model and the efficacy of that. You'll also see a specific key action and benchmark around our AP. There's a new accountability factor in the high school's accountability rating that looks at grades 11 and 12 access to advanced coursework. So there's real motivation not only to have a very inclusive AP program that provides access to more students, but we also want to see students having success on those exams. So there's a goal in there around that. There's an action, a benchmark around that overall goal. Number 3 is about the school building committee. It's very technical in nature, and it's what's coming up this year. And number 4 is about the leadership one that I had processed pretty significantly with the personnel subcommittee around my communication and interaction with the committee, as well as my support of the staff and the leadership team.
Are there any questions or comments? I have a couple comments. First of all, I think the handout has only SMART goal number 2, if I'm not
Right.
mistaken.
That was a
It's the only
change.
one that changed from last time. The packet has all of them.
Right. Yeah, we get, yes. If you look at goal 1, this is to the policy subcommittee. If you look at key actions on goal number 1, then you look at page 24 of our packet, where Mr. Armacost made some suggestions. To me, I see some overlap, and I think the policy subcommittee has got to take that, has got to be aware of both of those inputs. You know, when you do the charter, if that subcommittee decides to revise the charter, or create a new charter, that would have to be done in light of or in concert with this goal, I believe. And we certainly don't want to have redundancy or duplicity in this whole thing, or we're going to be bound and we won't accomplish anything. So I think there's merit to both, but we have to be aware of both, simultaneous existence of both.
You're talking about aligning the strategic plan with this goal.
The recommendation for the new subcommittee that the chair wanted
For
the
the
policy
SEL.
to investigate.
All right, if you look on page 24 of the minutes where Mr. Armacost made a recommendation, he called for the creation of a new subcommittee that dealt with some of the same things that are in this goal, I think.
So you're saying creating that subcommittee
They have
has
to
to
be
be
on-
aligned with
yeah.
this goal?
It
Yeah.
has to be at least aware of it, and I don't know what has
Well,
to be.
isn't it part of, I mean, if you look at the goal, that's part of the, that's one of the tasks. And one of the goals is to create a committee for SEL, so it's kind
Well-
of meeting the goal.
Yeah, there's a difference between a steering committee and a standing committee. That's one difference. And that's one difference, and it's an important difference.
Just one piece that might be somewhat informative. I do think that the steering committee is absolutely best practice, but Mrs. Pecor, who's the principal at Greenville, and I have applied for a competitive grant that would fund about $40,000 for the district to really explore and implement some solid SEL interventions and plans, and it requires a steering committee. So we plan to move forward with the steering committee regardless. We are certainly hopeful that we are going to do so with some funding from the state, which will come with a tool that we can assess our practices K-12. So there is that as well. There's that component that involves some of the day-to-day work. I don't know if the chair was thinking a little bit more about kind of everything from more soup to nuts on building security. He talked about weather. He talked about things of even that magnitude. But this is something that hopefully with the grant funding will be tied to some pretty actionable steps around social, emotional, day-to-day, if that makes sense.
Good. The other thing that caught my eye was you look at goal number 4 on page 13. You look at key action number 5. I don't think that the superintendent spoke about a survey that she ran, but, and we talked a little bit about this in personnel. I don't think this is necessary. This superintendent does a very good job in this area, and it's better than any superintendent I've seen. And there are problems with any survey, and I was going to tell a story about surveying omelets, but but it depends on how the question is asked and what you're actually looking for. And I think she may have overreacted there, but that's just my comments.
You're not alone in that question.
All right. Any more questions or comments about the goal? Remember, please make the motion to approve the goals.
Be it resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee accept the superintendent's goals for 2018 and 2019.
Second.
Motion's made and accepted, or seconded to accept the superintendent's goals. Are there any more comments or questions? In that case, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. And that motion is approved. The next subcommittee would be technology, and my guess is there's no report. Okay. We're going to building committee. Is there anything to be said about the project?
There is not, the same as last time, just a reminder that myself, Mr. Rob, Mr. Therian are going to be in the MSBA on October 10th in order to really have a dialogue with them about the educational plan. Skanska and DRA will be there as well to go over the entire preferred schematic report. This is really their opportunity to interface with us and ask their questions prior to the vote on Halloween. Just so that you're aware, you may see, I have spoken, Mr. Rob has spoken, I believe a few other people potentially have spoken to a reporter from the Eagle just about the coverage around that. So you may see something in regards to that in the Berkshire Eagle. But right now, we're just really waiting on those two big dates. I will say, and this is actually why I didn't think of this right off the bat, a beautiful thing, which is really what we wanted to see happen. We got feedback. People have really heard from myself, from John Armacrost, from Aaron, Rob, the information about the building project. They wanted to hear some other voices, and we had a great presence in each of the elementary schools. Mr. DiTomaso was at several of them, really going out into the communities, and the most recent one was in Cummington the other evening. Mr. Callahan was down there, Jason Dion, Mike Daniels, who is a member of the building committee and a Cummington resident, and several other people as well. Todd Emerson, who's a member of the building committee and a community member, and those have been very positive. Mr. Callahan, I believe, may be the one. Him and Mr. Dion have been at every single one and have shared the feedback with us, which it seems like they're reaching a wider audience and they're a different voice. So that has been, I think, a positive.
Good. Any questions? All right, the next item would be the superintendent's report.
All right.
Madam Superintendent.
There we go. I'm not going to speak to the first one because I'm going to speak to the first one more extensively with visuals. This was really an overview before we had the information that we had as of this morning. The distracted driver program at Wacona, you can certainly read. Maybe you want to access it. I know several of us on the staff think that we should. A really important program. They have it right in front of Wacona. I believe Aaron probably has already tweeted out a picture of it, but I certainly will try to do so. I'm not going to speak right now about the Director of Student Services position. I know there's something that may be needing to discuss in our executive session. We do have Stephanie Case on site. She is our interim director. Again, she's very, very familiar with us, and that's been a smooth transition. But we'll talk more about next steps as we determine them. I just wanted to give you some information about PBIS. If you did read through this, if you did take a moment to look at the videos, I've gotten some really good questions about PBIS that really made me realize that we were not explaining it as clearly as we could. So I tried to give you some resources around what it was, and I know some of you have extensive information about this, but for many people it's new. So check that out if you haven't. There's going to be a full presentation to the curriculum subcommittee on PBIS. All of our schools are implementing PBIS. Restorative practices is something you may do under PBIS, but PBIS is really a school-wide approach to really reinforcing positive behaviors on a routine basis. It's not about how you necessarily deal with negative behaviors. That's certainly part of it, but the big piece is really establishing what your key priorities are and reinforcing them positively. And then really being consistent when you do have to consequence something, that it's about a core priority, so your key values. Nesicus was accepted into a PBIS academy through the state, which is excellent for us. That will be a 3-year process for them to fully implement PBIS as a school. There will be a parent participating on that group. There are 2 teacher leaders who will be leading the group, as well as Mrs. White and several members of the staff. It'll be a 3-year, rather intensive process. I have updated before that Kittredge is really at an implementation stage, which is excellent. Craneville is very close to that stage and needs a little bit more support to finalize their plans, especially with our new administrative team that they will get on Friday the 5th. And interestingly, it's nice to mix up groups, but on our PD day of Friday, October 5th, Beckett, Washington, and Wacona are going to be together, which is not a group we put together, but Mary Kay and Mr. Rob are all about it. So because while logistically you say, wow, Wacona and Beckett, Washington, but they have some real similarities when it comes to this and where they're at. So they're going to be together as a group, and then there'll be consultants working with each of them in the afternoon. So we're happy that that's moving us along. I did just give a little bit of update about social emotional learning update. Mr. Gazzillo had asked that we share information about this on a regular basis at every meeting. I won't have data on incidents of bullying, fortunately, at every meeting, but I will give you that kind of data, but I want to include some other things as well. I think the prevention needs assessment survey that we do here in the county is relevant to include under that, just so you know it's coming. It's every 2 years. It's 8th, 10th, and 12th grade. Does compare us countywide, statewide, nationally. When we get that data, we will do an overview with you. And it talks a little bit about what that survey is. It's really at-risk behaviors. The other piece of it, an update we're still waiting, but we're got our fingers crossed that we're gonna get that SEL grant. I talked a little bit about the World of Difference training. I'm not going to steal the thunder of Debbie White and Joanne Dowling, who that's a part of their school improvement plan. But it's really looking at our implicit our biases that we all have that might be more implicit in nature that we have to recognize in order to be very cognizant about how we treat each other. And the training was very high quality, and the next step is training the students. But I will let them speak to it. Again, I did say that this is kind of social emotional. The impetus for this, though, really was concerned about incidents of bullying in the schools, allegations. At this time, I'm always cognizant if I present data that I make sure I'm not presenting individually identifiable data. That means the data is so small, you know that. We do not have any reports or any findings of bullying at the elementary level. We've had a couple of investigations at the secondary level. They're so small in number that it'd be identifiable for me to provide more than that. But you do need to remember, anytime there's an allegation, the parent now must be notified and there's an investigation. So I did have a conversation with a parent recently who'd been notified by administration at the secondary level that there was an allegation. There was no substantiation. And it felt like a kind of a not realistic allegation, but that's not, it's like a 51A. You don't screen it out at the start. You just automatically file if you suspect and let it get sorted out in the process. So there's been a couple of those, if that makes sense. But I will keep doing that probably every 2 meetings just to make sure that there's a credible amount of data to be bringing forward to you. I'll actually give you those numbers. My data is always as good as the last time I had a conversation with someone, and we know these are moving targets. But I will include this as a standing item. I'll also include upcoming events, and I won't take much more time on this, but if you are interested, another activity they're doing at Nessicus just to really kind of prioritize anti-bullying, prioritize strong relationships is Debbie has coordinated for a famous country singer to be at Nessicus. And if you look a little bit more into it, but do try and attend, I will get you the specific times if you're in the area and you're able to do so. So there's a little bit more on that. Again, a couple of things that are coming up. The school improvement plans will be presented by the building principals. We are going to do a more in-depth look at those at curriculum this year, just to really look closely, because you get the presentation. There's very specific, lengthy goals under each of them that we're going to go through at curriculum as part of their role. And then last thing I'll say before Leslie joins me is that I had talked to the chair, to Mr. Armacost, and what we had talked about, I said, do you want me to hold off on Cynthia Merrill because of the fact that we're having the ADA? He really felt they were a nice marriage, and that seeing kind of both perspectives, you know, the law around it, but also the reality of being an educator and a parent and how to use these things functionally, safely, appropriately. But the way that Mrs. Merrill presents is a little bit more interactive. So we actually talked about having it be an option prior to a school committee meeting for people who can attend. We'll do it as a parent night, so parents can come, school committee members can come, and it'll still be an option that exists for us. So you're gonna get the opportunity to present, to participate in both, if that makes sense. So can you do it so I can, I do not like it so it's cast up there, but I also have my notes. Awesome. We are going to transition right into the MCAS presentation. Couple disclaimers, whatever you want to kind of think of them as. This is hot off the presses. This was a unique situation. So I talked to Superintendent McCandless in Pittsfield. They had their school committee last night. He just didn't have the option to do this. The data hit this morning. So we were in this situation where it's nice. The data hit this morning. So I can stand right here in front of you tonight and share that data with you so you're not processing it on your own in the media. However, I do want to remind you, the data hit this morning. So there's that piece of it. So Leslie and I are kind of like, if we look that way, we are that way. I've also done this presentation now twice already today. I'll explain to you why. And this is the third go around with it. There's that. Twice already actually saying it out loud to other people. I've probably done it many more times in another capacity. So when they're doing that, and we're going to kind of piggyback off each other, Leslie's going to take over when we get into some of the numbers a little bit more. And if we're kind of, really long.
I think they're in your.
I'm desperate, I'll do it, it's okay.
No, but they're in your other case, Joe. Printout.
Oh, the printouts for that?
No, for you with the notes.
Oh, with the notes, yeah.
Print it.
See, told you, with the notes, printouts with the notes. Anybody who knows how to look at the screen while being able to see your notes but not have everyone. I've done this presentation now in front of several different groups today. Nobody's been able to figure that out for me. So if Greg could, no one can. So that's our challenge in Google, in the Google world going forward. Let's see here. Here we go. All right, so we're going to go through the presentation. Interestingly, this morning when I was kind of thinking about this for the umpteenth million time, for the first time in a long time, I think that Leslie and I, and certainly our administrative team, and then the staff we talked with today, while there are some things in this data that we have some very significant concerns about, and we do need to be very, very clear about this, and there are also some things in this data we are very, very happy about, and there are some things in this data we have some really questions about, and we really need to look at more. One of the things about this data that the first time we feel very empowered by it. This is data that we can understand, this is data we can look at, this is data that is not going to change. So when you hear that, oh, the system keeps changing, the numbers keep changing, we can't compare this to that, that is over. That is no longer a story. For the first time, we know the game, we know the rules, and we know what we need to do to play it well. That story, if you hear that, is no longer true. They've explained it to us. What they don't have, and the commissioner has been very cautious, they don't have trends because they don't have 3 years yet. So if you say, does this mean? Might, but I really would like to see a third year of it to say yes or no. 2 years in the world of data is not a ton. So we don't have trends. But what we absolutely do have, we have a baseline that we can compare ourselves against from last year. Be careful when we're talking about comparisons, we're talking about from last year. So what we really want you to take away from this presentation, if we do it well, is we want you to understand the new system. We want you to understand how it works, how we're using it, and how it's being communicated, and we want you to understand our story accurately. What it means for us right now, because this system is much more about how we look compared to ourselves than how we look compared to everybody else. And we'll explain that a little bit as we get into the data. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So really, again, we had the opportunity today, and I'll talk to you about why we did this presentation with our administrative team presence. They asked some really good questions. We tried to clarify it through that process. And then we did this presentation with the NESICUS staff. Our data out of NESICUS is of significant concern to us. I've had a relationship with the NESICUS staff for a while now, as has Leslie, and what we really dialogued about, especially after a very difficult year last year, is nobody likes to be talked about, people like to be talked to. So out of respect for the NESICUS staff, I spent some time with them today. I explained to them that I have significant concerns about their data. They share those concerns. But I also went through the presentation and I said to them, if at any time you don't feel that I am valuing you as an educator, if at any time I'm indicating that I don't think you care about kids, you need to stop me. But if the data doesn't feel good, the data speaks for itself. So we went through that together. There are 2 things that I've talked to other superintendents who have been in these positions with data where you really need to make some significant changes quickly, and they really talk about you need to be informed, you need to know your data, you need to be aware of it, and you need to be accurate in your instruction in relation to the standards. So we can't talk about NESICUS without talking to them. A teacher did come up to me at the end and said that I hope you do express to school committee tonight that we heard this and we are ready, and we're going to use this data and we're going to make sure that this data improves. And that was kind of her takeaway. There was a range of takeaways, but I will say that it was an attentive audience that was willing to hear the information.
And just click on, the one you just closed out, just click on the next screen.
Greg tried to tell me.
No.
Okay, you figured it out. You figured it out. That's what it was. We need that kind of growth mindset everywhere. So I need that. So again, here's our testing history, so everyone understands. This is really, really important. And this is some of the stuff that we said today when we met with the staff at NESICUS. The legacy MCAS was the MCAS that was in place from 1998 until 2015. And as I've said numerous times now, as much as I don't like it for many reasons, 1998 was not 10 years ago, it was 20. We have had an MCAS system for 20 years. It's not going anywhere. We need to accept it. We need to work with it. The commissioner has been very clear. He believes in a system of accountability. He said 2 things. He wants a quicker turnaround and when the data is in our hands, and he wants it to be time responsible, meaning how much time is spent in testing is reasonable for what the impact is to students, but he is very, very in favor of an accountability system that includes standardized testing, and so we have to embrace that reality. we did have, this is where it gets into when people say we can't really look at the scores and we don't know what's happening and things keep changing. That's over. But that was a reality when we went from legacy to this PARC test that we did for a year and then to next gen. A comment that came up this morning, next generation MCAS and MCAS 2.0 are the same thing. You hear next gen, it's MCAS 2.0. It is our assessment system, it's what's staying. It's when the state of Massachusetts said, you know what, we don't think we want to do PARC, we want something that's more specific to Massachusetts. So that's what we have right now. We've been computer-based, that's another thing that we really need to be cognizant of for a long time. That's how we've been using the assessment system. But when I talk about that we really have good information now, we've done the next generation MCAS in grades 3 through 8 now for 2 consecutive years. We're continuing to do the legacy MCAS in grade 10 and with our 9th grade biology test. But in all other areas, we are doing the next generation MCAS. This year, for the first time, now this will be 3 years of data in grades 3 through 8, all computer-based, good data, including the 5th and the 8th grade science. This year, for the first time, we'll have next generation MCAS in grade 10, ELA, and math. We do not know what the plan is with the legacy biology test. There's been very little, if any, attention given to it. We don't know where it's going. We don't know what the long-term reality of it is, but we do know that this is what's going to be in place. One of the things that people, especially with middle school students, may be questioning is right now we do know that the legacy test is tied to graduation. It's a competency determination for graduation. You cannot receive a diploma in the state of Massachusetts if you do not receive a 220 or higher in ELA, math, and a science test. That score for graduation will not change until 2023 at the earliest. So that's not going to change. The test is that they're going to continue to have the same baseline for graduation, just for people to be aware of that. So again, just a couple things. Some of these I'm not going to get too into, but again, we have talked about next generation MCAS is about readiness for the next level. We've talked, and we'll come back to it, it's more about critical thinking, application of knowledge, making connections. We do believe the curriculums we have in place are a good fit for that in ELA and in math at the middle school starting this year. We have questions about K-5 math curriculum. We will talk more about that. The accountability indicators is very different than it has been before. Very, very different. You cannot do a crosswalk. There are new factors that never existed before. Things are being weighted differently, and everything is about, the shift is raising the performance of what's called the lowest performing students in a school. That may or may not be students with disabilities. They may be in that category, they may not. It's a much larger group. So some of you might have heard comments or seen stickers or whatever you've seen on social media. Massachusetts won in the nation, not for all. Massachusetts is number 1 in the nation, not for all. So this is all about changing that. This is all about prioritizing. We're not going to reward districts who are doing really well with some kids and not all. We're actually going to count the kids you're not doing as well with twice. And we'll explain what that looks like in a minute. Accountability information. And this is really important to take seriously and not interpret inaccurately. So discontinuation of accountability ratings 1 through 5. There is no more 1 through 5. It's not what the state is looking at. What the state is looking at right now are, do you need state assistance or do you not? And what that really is about is your accountability. It's 2 things. It's your achievement in comparison to other districts, and then it's your performance in comparison to yourself. And the way those are calculated is very different than they historically have been. I do want to be very, very clear. The elementary schools and the high school are in the group of not requiring assistance. It does not mean we don't have areas we need to work on. It does not mean that we're not going to be focusing certain interventions in those buildings, but they are not seen to be requiring any support or assistance. The middle school is. What you do need to be careful with is this is not an equation to the last levels under the old accountability system, and you'll see why. But it is a very serious identification for us that we need to be prepared to take some actions on. You've heard us talk about academies. 2 of the actions that we will be taking are the state academies in literacy and the PBIS academy. This piece of it, and then we're going to get closer to some of the data that Leslie's going to talk about. This piece of it, and please, Leslie, if you have things to add with this, I want to do this right. It used to be that I could cover this up and say, our performance as a district was 75% of this, how'd you do? And 25% of this. That is no longer the case. It's a far more complicated formula, and I'm going to go through it and talk a little bit about it. If you are a K-8 school, you're all grouped together, and some of these things are going to cycle in the presentation. I cannot compare Wacona Regional High School right now to anybody other, if we wanted to do county-wide comparisons. Pittsfield High, Taconic High, and Berkshire Hills. They're the only 9-12 schools in Berkshire County. We can't compare to the others. They're literally not in our group. Because if you do partial next gen, which at Drury High School, for example, their 8th graders take next gen. Their 9-12 take the legacy. They're in a different group. Our 9-12s are in a group with only 9-12s to compare against. We're one of 4 9-12s in Berkshire County. Our middle schools are now in a group with K-8s. And our middle schools really are one of 4 middle schools that look like themselves in Berkshire County. And that would really be Reed, Herberg, and Monument Valley. If you're looking at our K-8s, this is now worth 67.5% of the overall score. What that means, and this is really important, the math scaled score, the ELA scaled score, and the science scale score are averaged together to give you an achievement rating, and then you're ranked against the state. You might be saying, wait a minute, there's only 1 science, and there's 3 math and 3 LA a building. Yes. Are they weighted equally? Yes. That's pretty big, right? That's a pretty big factor. At the high school, this number is much less. This number, I believe, is 47.5, and I'll tell you why. The growth data is about 22.5% for both, but it's not the old growth data. The way they do it now is they look at your overall growth. ELA and math have growth, we know. Your overall growth, and they look at your lowest performing students' growth. They take both, they average them together. So what are they doing? Are they counting your lowest performing students twice? Yes. Lowest performing are counting that twice. Does that make sense? So that's what they're doing there. High schools is the same. Now, where do the other points come from at the elementary? Chronic absenteeism make the other 10% up. We lost points at the elementary level in chronic absenteeism. Chronic absenteeism means that you are in a school, you have to be there for more than 20 days, and then you count. You have to miss more than 10% of your days, that's 18 days in a year. It doesn't matter if it's excused or unexcused. They rank the percentage of kids that you have there. They set targets for you for how you should have done compared to last year. And you receive points or you don't for that. Chronic absenteeism is not about excused or unexcused. It does not matter. The one caveat to chronic absenteeism is presence. It's not about constructive presence in a building, it's about access to education. So some of the questions that come up are, what about a student with home hospital tutoring? What about a student with a mental health issue? Those are not students that we can't come up with plans for and have not counted in this, but somebody who's going to spend 3 weeks in Hawaii, that's a problem. That's a significant problem. A student who takes off Fridays, a significant problem. Now, the high school, you're saying, okay, I'm missing 20 points. Yes, I am. At the high school, I'm missing 20 points because the high school has a separate category for graduation. Back up one step. The high school's absenteeism actually counts for a little bit less because they also add in some points for percentage of students in 11th and 12th taking advanced coursework. What is the reality around that? They don't want to see us just getting kids through MCAS and then not still pushing our lowest performing subgroup. They want to see things like open enrollment in AP. They want to see dual enrollment at the community college level. That's what that is. But then come back to the other 20% that Wacona is getting. That is their overall dropout rate. That's their 4-year graduation rate. That's their 5-year graduation cohort and re-engagement. You get points for avoiding dropout altogether. You get points for having 4-year graduation. And then you get points for having kids come back, graduate in the 5th year, or stay engaged in the school. That's what that is. If you exceed your targets, you get 4. You meet them 3. Improve below 2. And no change would be 1. You get 0 if you decline. That all goes together to come up with your overall ratings at this point. Does that make sense? And you're going to get 2. One is how well you're doing, and one's how well you're doing against your targets. And your targets are specific to your data last year. Good? It's a lot. This, where you have in front of you, if you're going, I can't see that, no, you can't, but it's just really to show you they're revamping the district report cards so that you look at it differently, and it literally is this column here, is all students. This column here is lowest performing. Your lowest performing is the lowest 25% in your school. That is affecting significantly, and I'm just going to say significantly, because we're going to let the data speak for itself, because it's actually not negatively, significantly impacting in all three, but it's impacting significantly at Craneville, Nesicus, and Wacona. Beckett and Kittredge do not have enough kids to have that subgroup. So that's what that is right there. This is, I'm going to quickly, because this is not us, I want you just to have an idea. Now, we have to get away from two things here that I don't want to kind of take it away when you're still used to it, so we're going to show it tonight, but we're going to encourage you kind of to start to shift your mindset. This right here is the ELA data at the state level. You see it says scaled score. There's a 30-point range in each category. So if you're meeting or you're exceeding categories, you're a 30-point range. When we tell you the percentage of kids meeting and exceeding, that's been what we've done historically in this district, right? We said how many kids are advanced and proficient, how many kids are meeting and exceeding. That's not what the state cares about or how they're ranking us anymore. We're going to show you it tonight, but I caution with it because it does not tell you. If I'm meeting or exceeding, there's a 30-point range. I didn't tell you if they were at the very bottom of that or the very top of that. If your kid got a 70 versus 79, you want to know. 30 points, you want to know. So what the state is doing, when the state looks at us, they scale the scores. They actually look at where we are. When we just tell you that percentage, we got to get away from that. That's not a helpful number for us. If it's good, if it's bad, it's just not good. The other thing I'm going to encourage us to get away from, and I'm open to dialogue, is comparing ourselves too much to Berkshire County. There's some concerns in Berkshire County at the middle school level. It doesn't justify anything that we have concerns about. We really need to look at schools that look like us demographically, and the state provides us those schools. They'll be providing us. These are schools that look like you, have resources like you, and you should be performing like. So think about that. It's a comprehensive high school. It's a much larger high school in an urban setting. Are they a good comparison for us? I don't think so. So ELA as a whole, in the previous slide, is up slightly at the state level. ELA performance, again, all we're talking about is 17-18 to 16-17. That's all we can talk about right now. Nothing else makes any sense. So from 16-17 to 17-18, ELA is slightly up. There was a small dip in 7th grade. Math is slightly down overall. Again, I was on a phone call with the commissioner. The legacy tests have stabilized. There's no substantial changes in them. They all went down by like a point, nothing that was substantial. The commissioner was challenged around the 5th and 8th to say, is there a downward trend? And he said, no, we don't see trends within 2 years, and I'm not going to make any comments on that. We saw stable science scores in 8th. Our 5th grade scores in science were up quite a bit. They exceeded their targets. So that's not our story. This is the last slide that I really want to make sure I speak to. This slide has a lot more in it than what you are seeing, and it's our story, and it's our story we have to own. And it's a story we've talked a lot about. And Leslie, please share what you think as well and how we frame this. Wacona and Beckett, Washington continue to be our highest performing schools. Their achievement is good. They are performing with the schools that look like them. Beckett is outperforming the schools that look like them by far. This is their accountability percentile. This is when you take their math, their ELA, their science, and you give them an achievement score based on their overall average score. Not average of percentage of kids in advanced and proficient or meeting and exceeding. Their overall average score. This looks good. The cautionary tale, what we're worried about, is this is an excellent accountability percentile. What we are concerned about is this is not. This needs to be at 50. This needs to show Beckett compared to Beckett is making good progress. Again, it's not, but Mary Kay really wants the story to be told, that this is her number. This doesn't tell her whole story. Beckett needs to perform stronger against Beckett. I will say this is not an excuse because it's their reality and it's one Mary Kay embraces. Their targets are very high. When you perform high, your targets are high. So you've got to really rethink how you're going to meet those targets. But they can, and they will, and this is a number that's concerning for them. So I'm going to skip to Wacona for the same reason. Wacona is right where they've been. So we think of where's Berkshire Hills in comparison to Wacona, where's Bourne High School, where's Swansea High School. These are high schools that look like, they're right with Wacona. They're 45s. Wacona's right here at 46. This number is of concern. This number is Wacona against Wacona. 17-18, 16-17. And Wacona's having some challenges with their lowest performing subgroup. So this is a number, so you really want to be looking at. So they're rank ordered like this, but you've got to go to the right to say, yeah, but how am I going? Where am I going? Look at that district that's right next to me with a 45, they have a 52. That's something we have to be watching. So the story's really at Beckett, Washington, or Wacona, doing well. Really, we're concerned about their performance year over year compared to themselves. They need to push it with the targets, even if the targets are high. With Wacona, it's more about their lowest performing. This story, I absolutely am, and I'm going to give some real accolades to. That's a story you want to have. Kittredge Elementary School is progressing towards or meeting their targets at 70%. That is very high. The state sets the bar. They're really happy to see 50. That is very high. They want this to go up. Of course they do. This is where they've been, but this will go up with this. So when you look at them, they have the opposite story. They're at the 33. They're not really loving that, but in this column, they're higher than most of the districts around them because they're moving. That's where you really want to see movement forward. Same story out of Craneville, and really with Craneville, that's a really, really important story out of Craneville because this is the first year that Craneville is really looking at that lowest performing subgroup, which is a big impact to them. Our biggest concern is absolutely out of Nessicus. That is what it is. It's absolutely, they're not getting points, they're not moving where they need to be, and it's a huge concern for them and for us. Talk a little bit about this. This is the one we're showing you, and we're saying it doesn't really mean anything. Because it would be like if I said all our kids get C's and all our kids get 70s versus all our kids get 79. You don't know what's in there. That just means they met or exceeded. So just a caution, this is all accurate, right? But you're going to see in other data, 5th grade outperforms the state. You're going to go, your data's not wrong. No, they do, because their scaled scores are higher. Everyone can be in the same group, but if you have an 89 and someone else has an 80, that's a big difference. This doesn't show you any of that. Does that make sense? It's just the state doesn't use this data anymore. Do you want to add anything about that one?
Not only that this is sort of an old, this is the way data's been traditionally reported, but basically what would happen is students were assigned a category by their score. And so if they were in the meeting category, they were given a standard 100 points. If they were in the exceeding category, they would be given a standard 100 points. If they were in partially meeting, they'd be given 75 points, regardless of where they fell in that band. But right now, the targets that we're being held to and that are being set for us, every student, there's an average that's taken of the scaled score. So every student is assigned a scaled score, and then an average is taken. So that's how our targets are set. Our targets are not set by the number of students that are in the, or the percentage of students that are in the meeting and exceeding categories. So we put this up because this is a kind of a traditional way of presenting our data. But this isn't really the way anymore that we're being held accountable.
This, in large part, looks probably slightly better for the middle school. It doesn't look as good as the elementary's data does when you present the elementary's data the way they're actually looking at it, if that makes sense. As far as huge changes that we've seen, we have seen a fairly substantial change in grade 3. Most of the elementary school is at or slightly moving forward, and we have some concerns in grade 6, 7, 8. Grade 6, 7, and 8 looked at this fairly today and said I didn't expect it to look like this. When you saw the numbers you just saw, you wouldn't expect this. You'd expect worse numbers. You absolutely would. That's because that is the percentage of kids in meeting exceeding. It doesn't take into all those other factors I talked to you about. All that is how many kids met and exceeded. It doesn't take into how low they were in the meeting category. It doesn't take into the meeting their targets category, and it doesn't take into consideration that lowest performing 25% being counted twice. So that's part of what that is. And there are areas, I mean, there are areas that move closer to targets. There are areas that are not terribly far from the state. But it didn't translate in the way the state is looking at our data. This is not how the state is looking at our data. This continues to be how Wacona's data is being looked at. You're not going to see it look like this next year. We don't know exactly, given that they're going to keep the 220 bar, what it will look like. Wacona's story, this is their good side of the story. The other was their concern. Wacona's achievement is good. It's obviously above the state. There was a dip in math. We did see a decline in math from last year, from 82 to 76. But by and large, they're stable. Their growth is very good. That's student performance in 8th grade in comparison to students in 10th grade. Their growth is very strong. Where they are not strong is Wacona against Wacona out of last year to meet their targets. Doesn't mean that Wacona looks drastically different than last year. It means they set targets for them that they would earn points for, and they missed most of the points. Doesn't mean that it's like, oh, did they go back? Did their achievement go down terribly? No, they missed their points. They set targets for them, and they didn't get there. And one of the biggest concerns right now is the target of the lowest performing subgroup. Does that make sense? The one other factor to know about is that, and this is a reality that tells a story that we need to be honest with ourselves about with Nesicus. Many districts are also getting 20% of their points for students who are ELL. If you have 20 students who are English language learner speakers or more in your school, 20% of your score is about ELL. That's how much focus the state is putting on this at this point. Many of the schools that Nesicus is in a similar situation to have those stories. We know we don't have those stories. We know that. So we really need to be honest with ourselves about that. We're really excited for Craneville. Craneville's growth is good. Craneville's achievement is good in many areas. This is what it looks like. This would take all day to drill into every single one of these, but this is what it looks like because there are 3 of these for achievement, there are 2 of these for growth, there's 1 of these for attendance, there's several others as well that show you other factors. This literally shows you, so if you look at Craneville's, and again, this is kind of the challenge, and I talked to Nesicus staff this afternoon about this. Craneville and Kittredge and Beckett Washington have a good story, and they do, and I think it deserves to be noted. 5th grade has a phenomenal story, and it does not mean that the Nesicus story is not very concerning, but we are a whole district, so we really do want to present that because there's some really nice things coming out of those scores. Craneville met exceeded their targets in ELA for all students. Their lowest performing group, and that was really the first time they've really seen this, and I will tell you, it was targeted focus on that coming out of the administration at Craneville. They knew this was coming, they owned it, they knew who those kids were, and they were really closely watching that, and the teachers embraced it. So I really do want to give, when you see this, this is really what you do want to see. They met their target, they exceeded their target. This is improved, they're going forward, but they're below where they need to be. They're off by point, whatever it is, 1.0. No change, they exceeded their target in students with disabilities. You might see here, this group has 33, this group has 32. It's a 1 student difference. Are they the same? Not necessarily. Some of those students may be in that group, they may not be. Does that make sense? So you could be getting scored on the same students 3 times, essentially. Could be even more. If you have a student they're all going to be scored for all, lowest performing, special ed, and it could be other categories as well. But that's Craneville and ELA. Kittredge, this would look the same for in many ways for all of the schools right now with grade 5 science. But this is Kittredge. We had a lot of dialogue last year about certain schools and whatnot. Kittredge improved in all areas. And really a lot of targeted coaching, a lot of very specific focused instruction, and a lot of hard work. And I think that we really do need to acknowledge that. They exceeded their targets. Kittredge gives Leslie and I pause about our math feelings, but we still feel Kittredge did some really good work in math. We still question our math curriculum. They gave us a little bit of pause there, I would say, a little bit with that. So that's Kittredge. Grade 5, I will say, kind of sometimes you say, do you know why that happened? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I mean, I would say, and from being an observer of it and a part of the conversation, grade 5 science, yes. There were some really targeted things that took place. Kittredge Elementary scores, yes. The lowest performing group at Craneville, yes. There's many yeses. Did you do something and you think this is not a direct impact? Yes. Again, Kittredge is meeting their growth. What we've talked about is their targets are high. I'm sorry, Beckett is meeting their growth. What we've talked about is their targets are high. Maybe I'll try to clarify with the Beckett kind of story.
I mean, Beckett has a really, growth is a really important score because it's how our children are growing. And I think Beckett's targets are very high, Wacona's targets are very high. Actually, Wacona in ELA has a target of 99 right now because they were already so high. So that's sort of an example of having really high targets. Even if you're not meeting your targets, you want to know that children are growing. Are they learning and are they growing? And I think this is a good example. The state really identifies 50 as a target for growth in all areas, except for science. In ELA and math, you're not going to see a growth target for science. But so Beckett for ELA, their growth is 59.3 and 57.7. So if, knowing that, this makes me very comfortable, knowing that Beckett, that these are their growth scores. And again, I think something to celebrate, that we're growing children, they're learning.
If you did look, you can look into all of these. The issue what you're going to see at Nessicus is it was declined and did not meet, and they missed all of the points. And that's what it really is. It's 1 out of 4 points, and when you're not getting points, that's exactly what happened in both areas. And you can look at all of these, and I can look at them in detail with you if you want to do that as well. These are more the growth comparison, but a couple of that.
Yeah, again, you're going to see across the board, you'll see these variations in growth. The state identifies 50 as the target, but really the state identifies anything between in a band of 40 to 60 as healthy growth. So if you are in that, if you're close to 50, and there will be these variations throughout the years, but if you're close to 50, I think you can feel comfortable that students are learning and you're growing them, always looking at them again, of course. But this is, again, you'll see that almost every comparison is close to 50. It might be, on the state level, it might be 50.07, it might be 49.99. But traditionally, the expectations and the state average growth is really centers around 50. I think we have healthy growth. If you look at our grades, if you look at our grade 4, we're 48, 47. Grade 5 is 57. This is across our district, 58. More concerning growth, which would be expected in grades 6, 7, and 8.
The one thing, and this is also, Lizzie and I, we've gone back and forth about this so many times. So again, like I mentioned, in Berkshire County right now, it was not feasible for us to. We don't have DART schools given to us yet by the state, so those are schools that it says, this makes sense for you to look at them. And it could be anywhere in the state, but they look at kind of our overall demographics, our data, our needs, everything, and they say, this is who you should look at. They're not going to tell us that Pittsfield is a reasonable comparison for us. The other reality, so what we are looking at that point, I think that is something that you could use and you could look at, and when that becomes available, we'd be happy to get that to you. Reasonable comparisons of other districts. We have to right now remember we can only compare Wacona to 912s. Right now, that would mean if I pulled the data this afternoon, which would have been feasible to do for the 3 other high schools in Berkshire County, I do know that data. Their superintendents, I don't believe, have presented it. It came out this morning. It is not reasonable for us to look at Paconic's performance or Pittsfield High's, and I think draw conclusions. So we're performing stronger in achievement. Is that something that's going to make us feel better? I don't know. I don't think it's really, I don't understand the root of why we would do that. I will tell you, in the past, Berkshire Hills is at times a comparison to us. They have sometimes different demographics and subgroups, and it could be that they are not this year. But when we look at Berkshire Hills right now, we are right with Berkshire Hills where we've always been. Wacona might be at a 46 of their accountability. Berkshire Hills might be at a 45. What concerns me for Wacona, though, is their percentage of meeting their targets is lower. That's our story. So we really are, and regardless of if Berkshire Hills were as well, that's still our story. Our percentage of meeting their targets is below 50 at Wacona. That's our story. The middle schools, the superintendent in Pittsfield has not done his data presentation yet. Herberg and Reed are not typically comparison schools for us. And the fact that their data looks just like ours is not something to make ourselves feel better. And that's a reality for us. So I could show you Herberg and Reed. I could show you that they look like us right now. I could show you that they look slightly lower. Our middle school teachers were not embracing that as a reason to feel okay with our data. I am not either. All 4 of the middle schools, based on my understanding, in Berkshire County will be requiring some kind of assistance. And that's not something that is in any way part of our story. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. What I'm a little bit more interested to see is when our DART schools actually do become available for the elementary and be able to share that. Right now, our DART schools for the middle school are going to look much stronger than ours. We know that. We accept that as something that is our reality and we have to change. But it's not going to help us, I don't think, to look at schools that are performing at or below us and have very different factors going on than we do.
Some district areas for focus, all elementary schools did not meet their target for chronic absenteeism, and we did, it was something that this is something that we needed to take much closer attention to, is something we've been discussing. We weren't that far off our targets, we weren't, but we are, this is something that we are focusing on right now. Craneville did not meet their targets for math, however, I do have to say that in that low-performing group, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in that low-performing group in math, they actually exceeded their targets. So I do want to add another, I do want to add that low-performing group, which actually counted twice for them, they met their targets in math. But we are, again, we're looking at our math program, and this is sort of giving us another reason to look at our math program overall. They are our largest elementary school. Nescus has not met their targets for achievement or growth in any areas. Wacona is not meeting their targets in the lowest performing subgroup, and that is something that Aaron and I are looking at very closely, and that we will be working on this upcoming year.
The one thing you might say, well, is it a big deal? Yeah, this is a really big deal. Kittredge, you saw a 70. If Kittredge had a 75, they would have been identified as meeting their targets. We talk about, is there a level 1? That's not what they're looking at anymore. The best you can be allowed to do is meeting your targets. At this point, some people who are exceeding their targets, but they would have been at meeting and exceeding their targets. They're moving in that direction. So all of this really, really does factor in. So we want to be looking very closely. Again, Leslie mentioned at Craneville that's absolutely the reality that they did get that in that lowest performing subgroup, which is great, but there's a lot of places that they didn't get their points in math, and that is 67. They're very close to that next level, which is a 75. Which is definitely where we want to be. If we pulled up the same exact sheet for Nesicus that we already have done and Nesicus staff has seen, it does say declined, and it does say no change, which means that they either did not get any points or they got a point in very few areas. And that's the concern right now. There are no points coming out of Nesicus. They did not get the points they need to meet their targets for achievement. So that's the reality. What does the data mean? And I do think we kind of try to be very clear with you about what the data means and be very transparent around it. Do I talk about to that?
I think in conversations that we've had and trying to draw some conclusions around why, it is early, like as Lori mentioned. We do feel like the coaching model has had a positive correlation in increasing our achievement and reaching our growth targets in ELA, math, and science. We are at the elementary level looking at least a 3-year investment around the coaching model and an online curriculum. Which brings us to the second part, which is that these units of study, the science curriculum, it's taken us a while. All of the units, all of the curriculum areas that we have invested in do require some extra heavy lifting on the teacher's part. They're not scripted. They offer choice, and we want to make sure. And part of that is because we do honor the craft of teaching and the professionalism around it, and it does require teachers to really make some choices around how they're going to meet the standards. So it takes a while, and now you're seeing the results of our FOSS units, our units of study in ELA, in math. Again, that one we do want to look at a little bit. And this is right here. It says our math curriculum right now has some limitations in rigor and problem solving, and like I said, that's something we will be looking at. Nesicus is in need of targeted support. And the common question we get is, what does targeted support mean? Like, what does that look like and what does it mean? So what the state is basically saying when you are in that place is they're saying, we have some supports that we will offer you. We still have a level of autonomy, but we have some supports that we'd like to offer you, and we're offering them to you for free. And so we've looked at them very carefully. Debbie's looked at them, I've looked at them, Joanne Dowling has looked at them, we've all kind of vetted them. You know it already, we've already looked at the CBRSD Academy. we had already applied to that academy. It's going to be free for us. The other academy that I looked at pretty closely was the Literacy Academy. I feel like the Literacy Academy, I attended the first session of the Literacy Academy a couple weeks ago just to see what kind of support they would offer. I think we definitely need to take advantage of it. We definitely need the networking that the Literacy Academy will offer us, the professional development. I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. It's going to support the programming we have in place right now. It's going to make teachers, it's going to increase our capacity as professionals. Instructional coaching in ELA and Nesicus, that will be Patty and I. So Patty will be as our new instructional coach. She will be at Craneville 3 days a week. She'll be at Nesicus 2 days a week. The other 3 days a week for coaching at Nesicus, I will be there. So they will have 5 days of coaching. Also, I wanted to mention that Sean Therian will be coaching in science. So he will be there coaching 1 day a week, but he'll be in 2 classes that day. Debbie White will be doing some logistics around time on learning. She's going to be doing some logistics on just looking at the schedule in general. She's taken a very close look at our targeted review and looking at their recommendations and thinking about what she can do to support those recommendations every day and long term. And then again, an aligned curriculum in ELA, math, and science. And really at Nesicus 6 through 8, they've had the writing curriculum for 1 year. The reading curriculum for them is new this year. They had a 4-day training in the spring, in June. So this is the first year they've had this right now. Will be the first year of a reading curriculum that's aligned 6 through 8. Their science, they piloted the science last year. It was officially adopted in the spring. This year they have a fully aligned science program. And this year they have a fully aligned math program. It's called Eureka Math. Eureka Math is, I mentioned in the subcommittee when we met, is a very problem-solving approach toward mathematical thinking. I think very highly of the Eureka Math program. And we will be continuing to provide support in these curriculum areas throughout the year. At Wacona, our growth is high. Our achievement is, again, some of the targets at Wacona have been set very high. We're not earning points in our lowest performing students in multiple areas, and that's an area that Erin and I will be working on this year, and also with the content coordinators, because the content coordinators provide an important role at Nesicus, or at Wacona, I'm sorry. Again, enhanced co-teaching at Wacona, and continuing to work in around universally designed instruction at Wacona.
Kind of, go into this question. I would say we did not get into, and I'll show you a little bit about some of the things in real time, but we did not look at every single school individually at the elementary level. I do have concerns that's perilously close to personnel data. And I did confirm with my colleagues, with superintendent of the county, and nobody's looking at individual teachers, they're looking at grade levels. So for example, Superintendent Camus shows grade 3. We really, though, interestingly this year have made that shift. If you do go on, you do look, we have some nice equity. And we want people to keep on moving and keep moving forward, and schools that have been performing very high to reach those targets and keep on going. But you would see some really nice things coming out of our elementary that are pretty aligned across the grade levels. We don't do different things with curriculum. We don't do different things with our supports. So really we would expect that they would be looked at as a grade level, but I will show you how you can look at that in the state website. Again, the state data, again, they're using that information to provide actionable information to families, to districts, access to their resources, who can have things that they're going to be offering, who their priorities are, provides information about district and school performance beyond the test scores. Please do remember, though, when you are looking at Wacona, there is the other reality that there are points they need to look at. Their dropout rate obviously is good. Their 4-year graduation rate, though, in their 5-year re-engagement, they have very high targets in this. One of the stories that we talked about today at Nesicus is that we're a small family. and everything impacts significantly. So when you look at us as a district right now overall, it does not look in any way reflective of where we actually are, because one school performing in that kind of a category is going to significantly impact us. If you lose points in a 5-year graduation rate, that's significant. Chronic absenteeism at the elementary level is significant. There is not as many to kind of consume the way you might see in a Pittsfield that I think has 12 schools. So there's the other reason for kind of making sure that everything we're doing, we're being very, very careful with, we're being informed, and we're being accurate about that. This is what a parent will see. This is why we kind of are trying to really get people away from that percentage in meaning exceeding. All that tells you is they're over here. And I as a parent would be very interested if they were over here or if they were right at a 502. So in that score does not tell you that. The achievement that we're talking about that we're compared against the state does, if that makes sense. Can I talk to this, Leslie? Sure.
So what happens with this data, at Central Berkshire, we start out, we look at it in different ways. We start out with more of a whole district and then a whole school picture. And then we go into it more deeply. So for example, with our reports, we have the capacity to look at where schools perform with individual standards. So we look at the strengths with individual standards, and we look at our challenges with individual standards, and we make note of those. And we specifically, we meet regularly in data analysis teams to make sure that we're addressing any standards where we think our students might be struggling. We also always go back to this original assessments with benchmark assessments, but we compare how our students are making growth toward those. And we are in the process right now of developing some action steps for some concerning indicators such as chronic absenteeism. Those are points that we think that we should be able to get, that this is something, a lot of times even in the smaller schools, it's not that many children, but we really want to address that pretty seriously. We do, like I said, we do monitor our benchmark data very carefully. For some students are monitored and we look at growth data actually every couple weeks to every month. Some students, it's actually more like 3 or 4 times a year. It depends on a student's needs. And again, the focus is really progress toward the standards. We really want to set high expectations that all students can meet the standards. It's really about the scaffolding that we provide for them. So this data is important to us. It's important to look at the students we have in front of us. It's also important data for our teachers to look at and to say where are our strengths and to be reflective and to think about having sort of that growth mindset and where do we need to make either content area shifts, but in a lot of cases it's sort of pedagogical shifts. It's about our teaching. And that falls into kind of speaks to the coaching role and just having somebody say, well, maybe if you try this, or let's look at this, or let's teach together. That's a lot of the work that I do every day. I've done a lot of that work in the elementary schools. There's going to be definitely more of a shift on my role in coaching at the middle school with some help from Patty, which we've already started. That's not something that we've waited. We've already started some of that.
Any questions that can guide before I go into anything that is not what people are most interested in?
I'm sort of glazed over with all of this. It's a lot. And I thank you for presenting it as well as you did, but it's totally confusing. And I'm concerned about parents getting their kids' reports. When are those student reports going to be sent out? And will there be any preparation to help parents understand what those reports look like?
So yes, so the reports, you will not receive them in the office until tomorrow, and then they can be sent out. They do come with a cover letter that does break everything down and does explain everything, and these are the same reports parents saw last year. But certainly the principals send home weekly communication, and I anticipate they're going to go out Friday night. Their communications, the elementaries do, middle and Aaron, I think, sends his like Sunday night, but sometime, and they'll also be explaining to parents what this says and how to reach out if you have questions. I will send you the letter that goes with the parent report so you can see it, that they'll receive. And Barbara's other point, this is a lot of information. and it's a lot of new information, and we need to kind of take it in chunks. The school improvement plans are going to happen on a different night. You'll hear even more specific data then. We can revisit this as another topic and talk more in depth about it at another meeting as well, because it's a lot, and it's been a lot for us to process, and certainly today was even more information. So some of it we are explaining to you that is newly solidified for us.
Good questions. You know, when you measure something, you always get what you measure. And I'm a little concerned, I'm all for bringing the bottom up, I'm totally for that. But if you're counting them double, you know, that really, you're gonna focus really heavily on that. And I'm afraid that what we'll do is we'll drive behavior to ignore the top performers, you know, because we also want to engage them, and again, just because they're top performers, we also want to make sure they're interested. And I'm just highlighting it as a concern that maybe we keep an eye on, that we're not driving the behavior that is, you know, to just drive that measurement up, but just focus on these kids and ignore the other kids. You know, I mean, they probably don't need the help, but, you know, you get what you measure. And that always concerns me. And I don't know if we're going to pay attention to that or watch that, or do we think there's a concern there?
Well, I think it's a potential concern with a misinterpretation of the system or a broad application of the system that is not what we want to do as educators. There's a slide we did not put up that came right out of the Commissioner's webinar that actually does address the fact that if your top comes down, your bottom comes up, that's going to meet your targets. That is not anything as educators we want to embrace or we want to be putting into our practice here. The achievement is still right there at 67.5%. That's absolutely right there. It's that growth that you're getting the double score in the lowest performing. But I don't think that again, that's something, I agree with you with what you're saying. I know our principals are saying, no, that won't happen, but we agree with you that that's what has to be a priority. The reality is at the state level, though, they're saying those kids have been traditionally left behind.
Sure.
And the others haven't.
And hopefully our choice of programming, so for example, in our ELA program, students are really encouraged, you know, to read at their level. So the core lesson is at grade level. But if you're reading at a much higher level, those are the books that you're given to read. So there's no, you know, we try to be as sensitive as possible to the fact we don't want to say you're up here and we're trying to be very sensitive. We might say we want you to read a book that has multiple characters and this kind of complex plot and describe it to the student, but we would hand that to them, but they wouldn't be reading necessarily the same books as their peers. But we try not to present it that way. We want to be sensitive to that. But students do get to pick books within a range, and that range should be around, we call them just right books, but that range should be driven by interest. But that range also has to be driven by what they're capable of doing and how they're capable of thinking and inferring and analyzing. So that's built into our program. So hopefully, and that's very true, I think, of the new math program that we've recently adopted. It actually starts out at a less difficult level and it scaffolds into a more difficult. So it builds right into these very complex problems as the lesson sort of progresses.
A couple of things. The new MCAS, you know, we always get the, you know, hey, you're teaching to the test, right? You know, and I feel like, from what I hear, there's a little bit, the tests now are a little bit more reasoned, you know, looking for, I'm using the word here, but they're not just multiple choice questions. You have to get to so do you guys feel that the tests are a little more, match more what you should be teaching and how you should be teaching? So if you're teaching to the test, you're doing a good thing as opposed to driving things down.
Right, if you're teaching to the standards.
Is that a good thing?
If you want to teach to the standards.
Yeah,
You don't want to, we wouldn't put multiple copies of tests in front of students all the time. We just wouldn't do that. We don't want to do that. But you're right, in some ways, if the conclusion you're drawing is I would agree with, if you're actually teaching to the standards, you are technically teaching to the test, but not in a bad way. You're teaching them.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
It's now teaching the test not such a bad thing because the test has been revamped to require a little more deductive reasoning and that sort of thing in the questions. Is that
Well, you
true?
have our kind of our coaches behind you. You know, you have our instructional coach, our two building coaches, who I kind of often look to for these things, nodding. And I know that I didn't know if it was Leslie or Mary Kay or Patty Roby, because they all kind of say these things that always catch me. But if you're teaching the standards well, the rest will come. And they do believe in the standards. They believe the standards teach
Good.
those higher order thinking skills.
Okay, last one, sorry.
It's a good question. Is it?
The other thing is with our educational plan that we developed for the new school, about 21st century learning. And it's all about interdisciplinary, you know, we really want to go to an interdisciplinary model, and do the new tests and the way we're trying to, you know, work towards raising these, are we trying to incorporate that coaching and that interdisciplinary model into how we're teaching to this test, or is that something completely different? We can't mix these two. Are we working towards that 21st century learning?
Well, kind of everyone owns this, right? Everyone owns this instruction that will move kids forward and that will actually give students a more depth of understanding with these standards. And it's not that you go to content areas and leave, that's a tested subject, that's not that kind of thing. So you're not there, but is that aligned with this goal? Yes. Are we there? No. The other thing you mentioned, I just want to be realistic about, is that you got vigorous nodding going on from some of our educational leaders around. Does teaching to the test, is teaching to the test a problem? They're going, no, we teach the standards well, and then the rest will come. Does everybody believe that? No. And do we need to make that shift? Yes. Leslie talked earlier about the pedagogical, but say it. I don't say it anymore. Instructional shifts, I'm not saying it, right, and philosophical shifts, but we can't resist this. We have to really, and I had a line of teachers, today, wanting to know more information, and that's an important piece. They have to want to know the information, and they have to accept it, because it's the student's reality. Somebody in the audience today kind of referenced, she didn't know she was doing it, but she referenced the Pygmalion effect, I think, basically saying that people will do what you expect they're able to do. That was one thing. Somebody else in the audience today referenced that they need to generate excitement and seriousness around this assessment so that kids feel that, because there's other things that can go into it more naturally at the high school where your diploma's on the line, it is, and at the elementary school where it's just a different kind of environment, and they really were owning that, saying that we need to really kind of embrace this and generate some excitement to support our kids. So I don't want to say, yeah, everyone goes, yeah, we teach the standards and it's great, we got to get there.
Chronic absenteeism, how do we get those people to say, oh, okay, well, we're not going to take our trip to Hawaii during school? How are we going to get them to say, our kids need to be in school, because it's not only going to screw them up with this, but it's going to screw them up with the day-to-day learning. My kids were younger and they were in school and I was in school half days. Well, why do we have to go to school? We don't do anything anyway. Well, because that's where you got to go. Okay, that's the number one. But do we eliminate half days? We just have all day periods, and so that I don't know. I'm just saying that was the attitude when I was in school. It was the attitude when my kids were in school. How do we get it through to people that they have to send their kids to school? They have to be in school. Don't take that trip. This is important. When I was younger, if you didn't go a certain amount of days, guess what? You stayed back. Oh my God, what a concept. You don't go forward because you're not here enough to go forward.
It is a lot of days as well. All of the principals have specific strategies of how they're going to be working with their communities, because they have different communities, but a part of it as well is being informed. I mean, one of our principals, say, one family could do significant damage to your overall chronic absenteeism. One family that continuously has students out and has 2 or 3 students in the school. That's kind of our reality. But the other piece, 18 days is a lot. So if people know that going into it, I mean, I don't know, are you going to take that once-in-a-lifetime trip that costs you 5 days? I hope you're going to be very cognizant then of every single other day. We're probably not going to get someone to cancel the trip, but we might get someone to be much more informed. We know we need to be informed and we need to be accurate anytime we're going to make improvements. So I think there's specific strategies each building has, but we have to remember, it is not about approved and excused and unexcused. So you go to Hawaii, then you're sick for a period of time. Serious illness, we can use different ways of supporting, but I don't really feel that good and it's raining. No, we can't. That is a problem.
No, that doesn't work.
Why can't we just make them be, okay, you're out a certain amount of days, guess what, you don't go forward. I mean, why can't we do that? I mean,
This might be
You
a
know?
whole other slew of things about retention.
Yes.
Obviously, nothing else is working.
Lots of pounds of retention.
Well, I would say, you know, this is a new rubric, right? I mean, this is the first time I saw chronic absenteeism, so it's really about educating parents and saying, hey, you know what?
Right.
When you take
It
a kid for a
counts.
vacation, you're impacting the entire performance of the school district. I think educating the community about that might have a little different effect on it when they do that. And I think that'll change, so your point is well taken, but I think this is a new rubric, so we have an opportunity to say, all right, hey, there's some meat behind this absenteeism, let's make sure the parents know that. I think that's the key, is getting that word out there.
Yes.
I don't personally, I think some of those families that take those extended vacations aren't really going to care about the
No.
overall performance of the district. They're going to say, look, that's nice, but we still want to go have our 2-week vacation because we can.
Well, Johnny has some ridiculous grade.
But it's more, I think it's more telling them now in elementary school, hey, this is nice now, but by the time you get to high school, your kid may not end up getting his diploma because you decided to take.
Well, we know we can do better by it, and the more we're informed about it, the more we can monitor it, and the more the parents are informed, they'll monitor it, and it can only improve. So I mean, I think regardless of all the reasons, we can do better by it. We can monitor it closer. They all have their lists already of who was chronically absent last year. They're already formulating plans. We weren't watching as closely because it didn't used to be part of our world.
I'd like to ask a question. At Nessicus, you talked about a literacy academy.
She's
Can you explain that?
She ran away. Can you talk a little bit specifically about the Literacy Academy?
Yeah, so basically what the Literacy Academy is they're 5 sessions. So and there's a focus. So the focus this year of the Literacy Academy is really, again, very similar. It's consistent with the state focus. So it's really providing strategies and reading material that meets the needs of all students. But there's a keynote at the Literacy Academy, so we would bring a team. So the idea is there's 2 main focus areas. Well, there's a focus for the content, but there's also 2 main goals. And one goal is to improve the capacity of teachers, in professional development for individual teachers. But the other goal is to really improve the capacity for teachers to collaborate, so that when they're talking with each other, they're influencing each other and they're making good decisions about literacy.
Are students required to go?
So students do not go, only teachers go. Only teachers go.
Oh, all right.
So only teachers go and administrators. Debbie and I will go, Patty Roby will go.
What is PBIS?
So PBIS is, that one's just literacy. PBIS is the positive behavior intervention support. And that will be a separate team. So Debbie will identify a separate team at Nessicus to actually participate. So we basically have 2 teams at Nessicus, one team of teachers and administrators that will be attending this Literacy Academy and very, very much coming up with, I don't want to say we have a separate action plan, but just steps that we're going to be working on to strengthen ourselves in literacy. But then there'll be a separate group of teachers and administrators that will be working on school climate through the PBIS Academy.
I'm around the high school quite often because I still teach driving. I go down and sign up kids. The environment at the high school is excellent. And I just want to mention that I know Mr. Rob is here. And he does an excellent job with Mr. Messina, and I think that is one of the keys to high testing.
Absolutely.
And I also think that we have a lot of the principals here, and your effect getting into the classrooms and getting teachers meeting their goals, meeting the standards that are set, is very important. And I know Mrs. Buckley, last year I said something kind of negative about Hinsdale School, and she said to me, and the scores went up, she said, oh, when I come back next year, I hope you'll say something positive about me. And I'm saying it. about the school. I mean, you know, the principals set the tone, and I know Debbie's moved from one job to another, and I know she'll do an excellent job. And you have the leaders of the schools have a tremendous effect on the whole environment. And I just want you leaders of the schools to know what a good effect you can have, including the superintendent and your assistant with the curriculum and stuff. You're obviously very concerned, and that has an outstanding effect. It passes on to kids. And I want to congratulate you all, and I hope that our tests keep going up.
Anything else? I think my mind is glazed over.
Oh, my gosh.
And I would hope that, I think it warrants a lot of other discussion, a number of other forums. I could have asked a question every 30 seconds.
Right.
But I think we want to continue a dialogue in a different setting perhaps, or different ways, but I'd like to absorb a little bit more than I have so far. But thank you very much.
No, we will do that. It's a lot more complex than it previously has been, but in some ways, if we use it right, it's even more informative, so. We will absolutely bring back, and like Ms. Locatell said, any way that we can kind of support getting the understanding of everyone higher, we have to be informed, we have to be accurate, so.
Is curriculum subcommittee scheduled a rehash of this in some fashion?
We have, okay, I lost it. Here it is. Our school improvement plan, October 18th. So we will rehash this in a smaller venue and look specifically at schools and what they're doing.
I'll ask questions so that we can understand. There are some things that were pretty controversial, some of the statements. I think they have to be verified, or I'd like an explanation of them.
I'm not sure I understand what the
Well,
statements are
it
controversial.
goes along with my every 30 seconds I had a question.
Okay.
How do you reach that conclusion? But anyway, this is a very important topic.
Yes. We won't leave it alone.
Anything else from the superintendent?
No?
All right, the next item on the agenda concerns personnel, and apparently there are no major changes that have to be reported. Is there any old business or unfinished business? Any new business that, yes?
I'd just like to bring up that I'm sure we all got this invitation in the mail today about Division 6 school committee members. There's a meeting in Lee on October 1st at 6 o'clock, and Smitty Pignatelli will be there, Senator Hines, and they gave us the agenda, which will be a little bit about funding and a little bit about legislation, and the Berkshire County Educational Task Force, the future role. So I'm going to go, and I can report back at the next meeting if you'd like, but it's in my backyard, might as well go.
Good.
Okay?
Glad you are.
So I won't be at policy.
Any new business, anything else that has to be discussed in a future meeting? Any remarks for the good of the committee? In that case, I would like to go into executive session. Remember that motion?
Be it resolved that the Central Berkshire Regional School Committee goes into executive session at 8:50 p.m. in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, 2, 3, to discuss strategy and preparation for the negotiations with its CBA unit, non-union employees, and to approve past minutes for which the chair has declared an executive session is necessary to protect the bargaining position of the committee and to reconvene, we're not going to reconvene.
Will not-
And to
We're
go
not-
home.
In open session at the conclusion of the executive session.
Second.
Second.
Okay,
A roll call. Sorry, I'm gonna daze. Dr. Kraft-Reese?
Yes.
Ms. DiTomaso?
Yes.
Mr. Farley?
Yeah.
Mr. Gazillo? Mr. Hopper?
Yes.
Mr. Locatell?
yes.
Mrs. Latazor?
Yes.
Mr. Less? Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Mrs. Tucker? Mr. Wagner?
Yes.
We're in executive session.